In this tutorial, I'm going to teach you how to use a combination of adjustment layers and selections to change the color of anything in Photoshop. Now let's take the example of this photo right here, and let's say we want to change the color of the yellow plate. Now usually anytime you're going to change the color of something, it's going to first start with you making a selection to isolate the area where you want to change the color. There may be some instances where you want to change the color of the whole photograph, but most of the time you're going to start with making a selection. Now there are really endless ways to make selections in Photoshop. What method you use is really going to depend on how complex the subject is that you're trying to isolate. So we are going to go over a lot of methods in here that really should help you along. So this one here is a pretty simple selection, as this is really a pretty clean line around this yellow plate. So whenever you have a strong edge like this around the object you need to select, that's when the quick selection tool, which is right up here, is going to make a good choice. Because what you do with this is you come in, you can change the size of your brush here, and you see it has a plus icon, and now when you click, it's going to look outward from where you click and look for those similar pixels and try to find a hard edge, and it's going to expand out and then auto make a selection based on where it finds the edge. So if I click here, it goes ahead and it starts to build my selection. Now as you're doing this, if you click again, it's going to continue to add to the selection, and again you can use the bracket keys left and right to adjust the size of your brush, because I don't want to select this plate, so I'm coming out to this area here. I'm just going to click along here. I'm going to keep clicking along. It's finding the edges, and you see it has done a very good job with just a couple of clicks, and I have selected everything I want here. This yellow plate did not select this plate, did not select the silverware. Because of these hard edges, the quick selection tool made really short work of this selection. Once you have your selection, what you want to do is come down here under your adjustment layers and add a HueSaturation adjustment layer. Now, because I had a selection made when I added this layer, you'll see it has automatically added a layer mask to that adjustment layer. So if I click on my layer mask, so I'm going to alt click on it. You can option click if you're on Mac, alt click on a PC, and that will show you the mask itself. So you see white is the area that's going to be affected, black is not affected. So let me click back and we can see that yes, anything I apply here with this adjustment layer is just going to affect this yellow plate. So then if I click back over to my adjustment layer, then I have this hue, saturation, and lightness sliders. So if you start to change the hue, you will see you can now come in here and change the color of your plate. You want a pink plate? You want to come over here and you want to change your plate even farther. So you can see you can play around with these new colors, and then if you want to adjust the intensity of the color, you come down here under saturation. If you want to adjust the lightness, you can use this lightness slider. So now you have these three sliders that are going to allow you to adjust the color, change the saturation, lightness if you need to, and just affect that selection you made. So that's pretty awesome. But I love the fact also that because you have this mask controlling what is affected by your adjustment layer, you can come in here and do fine-tuning if you need to. Now you might not be able to see at the zoom scale I'm at currently, but I actually missed an edge of this plate. So if I come in here and I zoom in, you can see that there actually is this little edge of the plate where I missed a couple pixels, and you're still seeing that yellow edge. Now that might not be a big deal, but if you want to make that fix, we can make that fix pretty easily. So this is where with selections you just have to think creatively, and you have to know the tools within Photoshop, because if I try to manually come in here and paint a hard edge with a brush, even if I'm using a tablet, it's going to be really hard to get along this edge. But remember, I already have this perfect curve selection. I just need to bump it out a few pixels. So if I control click on my mask layer here to select it, I can then come up here under select, and I'll choose modify, I'll choose expand, and I'm thinking 4 pixels is going to be about right to get out to the edge of this plate. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK, and you can see how these marching ants have been bumped out, and now my selection is currently going around that. Now remember, white on my mask is going to show and black is going to hide. So if I click right now over on this, you'll see that I have this edge right here where I need to fill it with white pixels. I don't want to fill everything that's part of the new expanded selection, because it's also coming in here on this white plate, and I don't want to get that here. But what I can do is just take a brush here, make sure I have black selected, make sure I am working over here on the mask, and then I can just start to brush it in, and you can see that very quickly and very easily I'm able to come in here and make that fix to that selection. Alright, let's see what happens if we try to use this same methodology to change the color of this white plate. So I want to change this from white, so I'm going to come in a little closer here. Again, I'm going to grab my quick selection tool, and I'm just going to start to click in that plate, and you can see really quickly it does a pretty good selection. You can see that it's missed a couple spots here, so again you can change the size of your brush using those bracket keys. I can try to get it to take a little bit of this out of there using the Alt key. If you do Alt, it changes to a minus, and so then you're taking away from your selection, and then a plus. I want to bring it in here, a minus, and so, okay, this isn't perfect, but it doesn't have to be perfect for the point of this example. And you saw in the last example that you can come in here and make adjustments after the fact, after you apply the adjustment layer, because you do have a mask that you can still come in and edit. So I'm going to use that as my selection, and now I'm going to come in same as before, and I'm going to choose HueSaturation. And again, HueSaturation adjustment layer applied, and if we alt click over on that, we see that we have this mask controlling just this white is going to be affected. So even though I have two HueSaturations now, they have different pixels selected, and so they are affecting different things. So I'm applying two HueSaturations, but one is targeting this plate and the other one is targeting this white plate. So if I come now up to hue on my HueSaturation adjustment level for this new one here, and I start to drag it around, we see that we're not really, I can see some slight hue changes, but not much is going on. So why is that? It's a white plate, so there is no color value there now, so I'm trying to shift the hue of something that's basically desaturated. It's not really going to work. But if you want to get it to work, click this colorize button, and then you'll find as you move around and you start to play with saturation, you start to play with the lightness, then you'll find that you can come in here and change that white plate to a colored plate. So for a white plate, if you do not have this colorize box checked, you're going to have an awful tough time changing that white plate, because what is it? There's no color information there. So use this colorize trick when you're making adjustments to something's white that you want to add color to. Alright, we talked about how to take something that's white and add color to it. What if we wanted to do the reverse and take the color away, make something black or make something white? So let's come in here and let's see, this is my original plate here that was yellow, and so if we come in here under HueSaturation adjustment layer right here, we see that we have changed the hue and we've adjusted this. Now if I want to make this plate go to white, what do I need to do? I need to desaturate this plate, and then I need to take this lightness slider, and I can use this lightness slider to make this a white plate, or I can use the lightness slider to make it a black plate. So if you want to go to white to black on a colored object, you have to first desaturate. You're taking the color information out of there, and then you're changing the lightness. You're either pushing it to bright to white, or you're pushing it down to black. Now when I push this to black here, I noticed sort of the same problem we had before, where a little bit of this edge was missed as part of the selection. But remember, just for review, we can do that same trick. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to control click on my selection. I'm going to go select, I'm going to go modify, expand. I'll try 4 pixels again. That's a little bit more than I need, but it's going to work out. And then remember, right there, I'm going to take and paint white on my mask. So again, my brush tool, painting white on my mask, and you see now I can take that edge and I can take that away and basically come in here and clean up these areas where I'm getting that color fringe. So you'll get this kind of fringing sometimes when you do use something like the quick select. It's not always going to be perfect, but you can come back here and you can make adjustments. Now obviously I could come in here and I could fix that if I didn't want that sort of color information spilling on there. But again, I'm not going to try for perfection right now, because just for the purposes of the example, we don't need to get it. But just know that you have the ability to come in here and make these adjustments to your mask after the fact, so you really can hone in and make sure that that adjustment layer is affecting just the pixels you want to affect. As I mentioned, there's almost always more than one way to do things in Photoshop, so let's look at another way to make something black or white that gives you a little bit more control. So I'm going to delete these adjustment layers so we can start from scratch. So I'll drag this one in the trash. Let's drag it down to the trash can. This one, before I delete it though, I do want to control click to grab that selection, because we're going to need that selection. We made that before and we're going to use that again. So I'm going to put this in the trash here. So now we just have the plate back to normal. We have our selection around it. By the way, if you ever have a selection that you're going to use again and again and you're afraid you're going to lose it, you can save selections. If you come up here under select and then you come down here to save selection, go ahead and click save. It's going to create it actually as a new channel, and so you can call this whatever you want. So I'm just going to call this plate 1 and go ahead and click OK. And now I can control D to deselect, and if I ever want to get that back, I can either go to my channel and I'll see it there, and I can control click on it there, control D to deselect. I could also, just from my layers panel, come up here and layer, and there should be select load selection, select load selection, and then you come down under the channel and you'll find it there. And click OK, and there it is. So that's one way to save selections, just a nice tip for you to have in case you want to preserve a selection. Okay, so we have the selection. Then we're going to start the same way we did before. We're going to go to an adjustment layer, and we're going to choose HueSaturation. This time, instead of messing with hue and the lightness, we're only going to use it to desaturate the layer. Okay? And so then we're going to now come and add a second adjustment layer, and we're going to add the levels adjustment layer. And you'll notice when you have a levels adjustment here, you have basically this histogram that shows you your tones from black to white. In other words, your bright and your dark areas of your images and your midtones, and you have 3 points. You have the black point, you have the white point, and you have the midpoint, all of which you can adjust. And because you have these 3 controls, this does give you more control over contrast than the method I showed you last time. So if it's not looking good the other way, you may want to try this method. And remember, if I just start dragging here to make changes here, it's going to affect the whole image, because we have no mask on this yet, because I did not have my selection activated when I created this levels adjustment. So we know as before, you could alt click and drag and copy that, replace layer mask, yes. But I'm going to go ahead and hit Control Z to get rid of that. And I'll show you a couple other ways you could do this. You could use the Alt key while you hold your cursor right between these layers, and you see that little symbol? That means you're going to clip this layer by the layer below. And so to create a clipping mask there, and so now again, if I came up here and made the changes now, you'll see yes, it is being constrained by this layer below. Now again, I'll Control Z to undo that, and if I get my Alt thing here, there, I'll do that. So I have undid my clip there. Now yet another way to do this, if I shift click these 2 layers together, and then I come up here and do new group from layers, I could create a group and call this whatever, and then I could take this mask here and I could apply it to the group. So now if you see, if I come down here and I delete this layer mask, well, it still is just affecting the plate, because now this group mask is controlling what happens to all the layers below it. So I think using a group mask like this is actually the best preferred method if you have a lot of layers that you know are all going to be getting the edits, and you want to affect just that area. Now if you just have a couple layers, it's really up to you. You can use any method you want that I just showed you, but if you have a lot of layers that are going to be getting, you know, the same pixels affected, then I would suggest organizing it under a group. Okay, but we're getting sidetracked, so let's get back to just making the levels adjustment. So again, we first desaturated with the HueSaturation. Now with levels, we have these 3 control points, and if I drag my black point up, you'll see that I can start to change that plate to black. And then I have this point here where I can control the contrast with this point. So if I really want to take the midpoints up, the midtones up towards black, if I want to take them down and bring back more of those shadow areas. So you just have more control when you do it this way because of the 3 control points. Now if I drag that back out and I start to drag my white point down, then you can see I can make the plate white. And again, you can use this to sort of control the shadow area. So doing this with a levels adjustment, you can push something to white or black after you've desaturated with the HueSaturation adjustment layer, and then you sort of have this midpoint slider to help control contrast. Okay, so that's another way to turn things white or black. Okay, so those were some really cool examples, and we learned some really cool techniques. But again, what you have to remember is your ability to make selections is really going to go hand in hand with those techniques we're learning, because you have to isolate the area that you want to be affected so it doesn't spill over to the other areas. Now in those prior examples we had really clean edges and we could quickly make a selection with the quick selection tool, but when you have something more complicated, the quick selection tool just isn't going to work. For example, if you look at this napkin here with the red checkered pattern, if I come in here close and you can see all the pinstripes and everything that's going on here, if I try to select this with the quick selection tool, forget about it. It's just not going to work. So we need a new approach for something like this. So here's what we're going to do. Before making a selection, we're just going to go ahead and we're going to add our HueSaturation adjustment layer. And then if you look here above Hue, you'll see this little hand pointer tool. And so if you click on this, what this lets you do is actually take a point sample from your image. So you want to click on the area of color that you're trying to target. So I'm going to look at the reds here and try to click something that's sort of a middle tone here from the reds, or in the middle of this range of colors that I'm trying to select. So maybe something like this. So if you click that, you'll see that here now it has switched from the master channel, and now you're in under the red channel, and you see that it has selected a range here. And so now if I start to make adjustments, you'll see that they have been sucked in to those reds in that red area. So I can come in here and I can make changes. Let's make that blue. Let's lighten it up a little bit, maybe desaturate it a little bit. Now we'll see that it is spilling over onto other things, but I have really narrowed it down so that it is affecting that red channel and actually this range of colors right here. Now because there are other things in the image, you can see that other things are being affected here. Now it wouldn't be that hard, since they're separated from this, to just take a paintbrush and come in here on my mask and paint black and paint those out. But you can also come down here and you can adjust the range so that you can make this so less areas are affected. So if I start to pull this back, you can see I just got rid of a lot of that, and now it's basically just on my towel just from dragging that slider. I have a little bit up there, so I'd have to play with this range a little bit more, or I'd come up here and I could use my brush to brush it away from there. And you see how quickly we made that so it is just basically on the towel. And again, if I wanted to take my black brush here, I could come up here and painting on my mask, paint away that here. And now if I check this on and off, I have it so it's isolated just to the towel. Look how easy it was to come in and change the color of that checkered pattern, which would be really complex if you just tried to make a selection of that. But because you can select color ranges using this tool here, or you could also select color range, another tool that works similarly, and then you really quickly can make a complex selection based on color values. Now, there is actually an even better way to do this than I just showed you. Now, let me pull this range back out again. I was able to use these range sliders to get rid of a lot of this extra stuff here, and I could paint it away because it's separate from here. But I could really make an initial selection that gets rid of that altogether. So let me just show you what I mean. Let's just trash this for a second. We're going to do the same thing, but this time before, I'm just going to take something like my lasso tool or magnetic lasso tool, it doesn't matter, just something that's going to allow me to basically make a selection around the area I want to affect, just like that. And then now if I come up here and I select my HueSaturation level, adjustment layer I should say, and I'll do the same thing where I grab here, I come over and I click here to define a range. But now if I start to make that adjustment, you'll see that it is constrained now by this mask. So now we have two things working in our favor. We have this mask that says everything in black is not going to be affected. But then beyond that, now we have within this mask the color range that we choose is going to be affected. So by using those two controls, you really limit down to start with the area that you're working with, and that makes it so you don't have other areas throughout your image getting affected. So it's really just giving you the power of two things working together, and that makes it a really powerful way to come in here and make color changes. So I'll go ahead and click back here again, just so we can bring that back up, and just so we can get this towel back to a nice blue color. So just like that, red to blue, very easy with the hue saturation level, hue saturation layer, create a mask for starters, and then come in and adjust it even farther using this tool here to select a color range. And then that is also a range you can adjust. Okay, so that was all about how to use hue saturation adjustment layers in Photoshop to change the color of objects, and how to use color ranges and complex selections, which can be made easily, to really hone in on those areas and change just the color you want to change. If you like this video, I'd love it if you hit that subscribe button down below, and stay tuned for part 2 of this. In part 2, I'm going to talk about really understanding RGB color, and really, if you understand and you know a target color that you want to change something to, how you can change exactly from one color to the exact color you want to change to. So that's part 2. As soon as it goes up, which will be soon, I'm going to post it in the description down below, so go ahead and check there now. It might be there already. If not, it'll be there soon. This is Greg from Purpose Blogger. Thanks for watching.